Hi, my name is Happiness. You're impressed with my name, right? My dad gave me that name. And yeah, as you can guess, he put a lot of hopes and dreams in me. I'm now 18 years old, and tomorrow I will fly to Massachusetts to start my college. My parents are preparing a farewell party for me downstairs. I have never left my hometown and been away from my family, so this is such an occasion. As I'm packing my belongings for college, a flood of memories come to mind. You see, when I was a kid, my family was dirt poor. We lived in an old, dilapidated house on the outskirts of Selma in Alabama. I remember we would buy a chicken at the beginning of the month, and my parents would make it last the whole month. I didn't realize we were poor, though. In fact, at that point, I was just a happy, carefree little girl, but that wouldn't last. My mom worked as a cleaner for a rich family, but they treated her terribly, and she barely earned enough money to even take the bus there. My dad was a lorry driver, and so he was away a lot, delivering goods to other states. Every weekend when he came home, I'd stand out on the porch as soon as I saw his big truck driving up the dusty road. I'd run out there and jump up and down. The best part was that he always brought me a little present, like a piece of candy that he'd saved for me, or a small toy. They weren't valuable gifts, but they meant the world to me. One time he came home, and I ran up to him and said, "Daddy, yesterday Jeannie's dad brought her a chocolate egg back from his trip. It even had a toy inside. I want one too." My dad looked confused. Then he said he'd heard of them, and they were called Kinder Eggs. And then, with loving eyes and a smile, he promised he'd find me one, no matter how hard it would be, even if it was the last thing he did. The next weekend, I raced out to the street and could barely contain my excitement as I waited for him to come home. I waited and waited, but still he didn't arrive. I started to get worried, so I asked my mom where he was. She said, "Oh, sweetie, he's on his way. Why don't you go to sleep, and as soon as you wake up, he'll be here." There was no way I could sleep. All I could think about was getting a chocolate egg with a toy inside. I'd almost dozed off when I heard his voice. I ran downstairs and jumped into his arms, hugging him. "I missed you, Daddy," I told him, and he laughed and said, "I missed you too, sweetie pie." Then I said, "Where is it? Did you get me a chocolate egg?" I eagerly asked. Then his face dropped. He said, "Sorry, baby. I was working late, so I didn't have time to buy one. But I promise I'll bring you two next time to make up for it. Okay?" But this wasn't okay. I was so disappointed. I pushed him away from me and burst into tears, saying, "You promised! You promised me!" I'd never cried like that before over something so small, but at the time it felt like such a big deal. And my dad looked confused to see me so upset. At that moment, my mom came through and saw me. She immediately understood everything, then started to comfort my dad. "Come on, honey, take a rest. You've worked yourself too hard recently. Come eat. You're so skinny these days." This just made me more annoyed. I was the one who needed comforting, not my dad. So I shouted at my mom, "Mommy, Daddy didn't keep his promise." But my mom just ignored me, and so I stormed back up the stairs, crying all the way. After I'd calmed down, my mom came to my room and said, "Happiness, your dad works so hard, and you should just be happy that he's home safely. I know he didn't bring you what you wanted, but he will next time, okay? In the meantime, I'll make your favorite cupcakes every day." "Every day? Wow, okay," I said to her. And she really did. She made me cupcakes every day, and I was so happy. After a few days, I said to her, "Mommy, I like you more than Daddy. I don't even love him anymore because he broke his promise." My mom just looked at me and said, "Oh, Happiness, you don't know what you're saying. One day when you grow up, you'll understand that everything your dad does is for you. He loves you so much." The next weekend rolled around, and as usual, I ran outside to wait for my dad. Just like the week before, the sun set and still he was nowhere to be seen. I was about to start crying when I noticed a man running towards our front door. My mom appeared and he said something, and suddenly my mom started panicking. She called out to me and said we had to go to Grandpa's place immediately. I had no idea what was happening, but for the next month, my grandpa took care of me because my parents didn't come home. I missed them so much, and whenever I asked when they were coming to get me, my grandpa just said, "Happiness, they're busy working. Don't you worry. Just stay here and enjoy your time with me." Eventually, I got used to it. Then one morning, Grandpa woke me up early and said it was time to go home. I was so excited that I kept on singing happily. As we pulled up outside our house, my heart started beating faster. I was home! Then a shadow appeared in the doorway, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was my mom and dad. But my dad was in a wheelchair. My mom looked so thin and tired, and my dad had no legs. What had happened? I looked to Grandpa to reassure me, but he looked as nervous as I did. Then in my little voice I said, "Daddy, where are your legs?" He smiled at me and with his usual loving eyes said, "They got hurt. But hey, what do you think of my wheelchair?" He let me sit on his lap, and Mom pushed us around, and it was so cool. I was way too young to understand what was really going on. All I remember was how many people kept visiting to check on Dad, and that I finally got to try a chocolate egg. That same day, a doctor came to visit, and after he checked on my dad, he came over and patted my head. Then he pulled a chocolate egg out of his bag, and then another one, and another one. 3 chocolate eggs! I couldn't believe it. I was shaking with excitement. The doctor said the gift was from my dad, and that I should thank him. I ran to my dad and said, "Thank you, Daddy." He looked like he was going to cry, and I asked if he was okay, and he just smiled and said, "I'm happy because you're happy. That's all that matters to me." For the first time in my life, I got to try a chocolate egg, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. And the best part was that inside there was a toy. After I opened and ate all 3, I just wanted more. I kept asking my dad when I could get more, and he just laughed. And then I thought, maybe if I studied really hard and was a good girl, I'd get some more. So that's what I did. I focused on my study, and one day I won a medal at school for winning a math contest. I was so excited to show my parents and assumed they'd give me a chocolate egg as a reward, but that's not what happened. They congratulated me, but said it wasn't possible for them to get me another chocolate egg. I don't know why, but this made me so angry. I cried, and I even threw my bag at them, and this made my mom super mad. She scolded me so much that I was scared and ran out the house and went to my grandpa's house. I cried and told him everything, and my grandpa said, "Happiness, the reason your mom got so mad is because she is under too much pressure and has to work so hard to look after you. Now, your dad can't work, so she's in charge, and it's a lot for her to deal with." Then he told me what happened to my dad, and it changed my life forever. That day when my dad was out doing his deliveries, he got an opportunity to do some overtime, which he jumped at the chance to do so he could buy me my chocolate eggs. On his way home, he stopped to buy them for me, and then because he was so tired, as he was leaving the store, he got hit by a drunk driver. He was hit so hard he lost both his legs. I couldn't believe it. How could I have been so selfish? If it weren't for me demanding a chocolate egg, my dad would still have his legs. I felt so terrible. And so the next day, when I won some candy for the other math contests, I came home and went to my parents. "Mommy, Daddy, I'm so sorry. I want you to have these. You always do your best to give me the sweetest life, and so I wanted to make yours sweeter too." That probably sounds a bit deep for a 6-year-old to say, right? Well, my grandpa taught me that one. My parents were so moved that they almost cried when they hugged me. And even though I didn't understand it at the time, I do now. And it's so true. It's taken me a while, but now that I'm about to move out, I finally understand the life my parents have given me and how sweet it has been. Through this channel, I'd like to send some words to my parents. Mom, Dad, if you're watching this, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for me. Now it's my turn to work hard and make you proud. No matter how hard life gets, I'll persevere, just like you both have, because I'm your happiness.
I walked into the cafeteria and gulped. The only free seat was next to Joanna, one of the weirdest girls in school. She was always sitting alone, and usually I'd avoid her because people said she didn't speak much and was totally shy. But somehow, I felt kinda sorry for her. I mean, how bad could it be? Well, famous last words. It was bad. I sat down with a smile, but she just glared at me and grunted, "Go on then. Throw me your worst insult." I was confused and said, "Oh, no, I just wanted to sit here and say hi. Are you okay?" Suddenly, Joanna started speaking at 1,000,000 miles per hour, telling me that of course she wasn't okay and that she had to see a therapist every day. Then she showed me all the pills she had to take and said she had crippling anxiety. I was shocked. Overwhelmed with TMI, I felt uncomfortable and thought of leaving, but then she grabbed my hand and said, "We're friends now, right? I've never had a friend in my life before. You're the first person I've really been able to open up to. Not even my parents know how hard it is for me." Whoa, I couldn't leave her now. I patted on her shoulder and told her I'd happily be her friend. I mean, it would just be spending some lunch together or grabbing a coffee at most. It'd be fine. However, Joanna's interpretation of a friend was slightly different from mine. 3 days later, I got back from the library quite late, so I went straight to my room as usual and started changing, only to find Joanna right behind me as I turned around. I almost woke up the whole building with a scream of fright. "Oh, hey, Rumi," she said with a big grin. What? This was insane. Rumi? What do you mean? But she just laughed and said she'd felt very lonely in her dorm on her own, and seeing as I had a double room, she'd asked the dorm supervisor if she could move in with me. I guess it wasn't so bad. I mean, I got lonely too sometimes. So that night, we stayed up super late chatting. And to be honest, it was actually nice to have a roomie. We became quite close, and a few nights later, we were having a movie night. Joanna turned to me and said, "Carrie, there's something I need to tell you." Oh no, surely there wasn't any more disturbing things left. How did this girl cope? But then she started blushing and said, "I have a crush on someone. His name is Mitch." Oh gosh, I knew exactly who she was talking about. "Joanna, he's bad news. He's a total womanizer. You're way too good for him." At least, that's what I said, but what I meant was that he was only into popular girls. He'd never go for a girl like Joanna. Joanna didn't take it well. "You're jealous, aren't you? I bet you have a crush on him too." "Well, I confessed, so he's mine." Huh, you're welcome to him. I never fancy someone like Mitch. I'm not that kind of girl. Joanna then said she'd prove to me that she could win him over. I felt annoyed at her and just went back to watching the movie. For a second there, it felt like my life had way more drama than ever before, and I started regretting ever sitting at her table that day. Little did I know, it was just the beginning. A week later, I was hit in the face by a huge surprise. Joanna and Mitch started dating. I was lying there listening to music when I heard voices outside the door. I opened it, and there was Mitch walking off. He turned back to blow Joanna a kiss, and then you should have seen the smug expression on her face. "Told ya," she said, laughing. Wow, cocky. But okay, I was happy for her. She was a woman of her word. But I was worried she'd get hurt. I didn't have time to tell her this, though, because pretty soon she was with him 24/7. He even came over to our dorm, and I was sick of listening to them kissing. They were disgustingly lovey-dovey all the time, and it quickly became exhausting. On Valentine's Day, he sent 100 balloons to our dorm, and I couldn't even get through the door. Could he be any more over the top? It wasn't even that romantic. But Joanna was smitten. It was painful to watch. But not as painful as seeing Mitch walking along the street holding some other girl's hand. I froze. This couldn't be. I quickly texted Joanna asking her how things were going between her and Mitch. She replied immediately saying, "All good, why?" So I told her what I'd seen, but I got no reply. I rushed back to our dorm and asked her why she was ignoring me and if she was okay. but she just started shouting at me, saying I was trying to ruin her relationship because I was jealous. Clearly, she didn't believe me. I told her I was telling the truth, but she just got up and left, slamming the door behind her. Things got really awkward after that. She ignored me in the dorm, ignored me in class, and wouldn't reply to any of my texts. And she still brought Mitch back to our room and kissed him in front of me. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and asked her to move out. But I didn't expect what would happen next. Joanna lost it. She started shouting, "What's your problem? For the first time in my life, I'm happy and someone loves me. And there you are, trying to ruin this for me. And now you want to kick me out? It's not my fault you're single, Carrie. Maybe if you stopped being so jealous for a second, someone would like you back." I couldn't believe her. I wanted to scream. She was the worst. And the next morning, it got even worse. I was sitting with some friends before class started when suddenly Joanna walked in and burst into tears. People ran over to her and asked if she was okay, and that's when my blood ran cold. She started saying how I'd been bad-mouthing her boyfriend, and now I wanted to kick her out of our dorm. And then I heard my voice. I looked over, and she had her phone out and was playing a recording of our argument. Of course, she'd edited it to make me sound like the bad guy. Even my friends looked shocked, and Joanna told them all how I was a two-faced, good-for-nothing kind of girl and that I loved to gossip about everyone behind their backs. I tried to explain to everyone that Joanna was lying and that she was just angry, but everyone looked at me in shock. It was like they believed her. I was stunned. The next day, I noticed Joanna showing my friends some photos on her phone. They were screenshots of texts from me, but she'd edited them to create a total monster out of me. One time, Joanna had messaged me laughing about how my friend Valerie had the worst hairstyle ever, and I joked that she must have cut it by herself. And there was the message where Joanna talked about how Mitch said his ex, Anna, who was also our class president, must have been flirting with the economics teacher to get good grades. And I said, "Has Anna sunk that low? Not only having an affair with a married man, but basically committing academic fraud? I don't think she would do that, though." But of course, Joanna had cropped out the last sentence, and she didn't show her parts in the conversation either. By that way, I looked like the worst friend ever. I tried to tell them what Joanna was doing, but they were too hurt to believe me. But that's not all. You see, Joanna had sent these messages to the whole school. For the rest of the day, people were coming up to me and telling me I was nothing but a mean girl. And then at lunch, I went to sit in my usual spot with my friends, and suddenly they all jumped up and left me there alone. I could hear everyone whispering about me. And then the most popular girl, Amy, came over to me and said I was a disappointment to this college, and I didn't even deserve to be here. I couldn't hold back my tears, so I rushed back to my dorm. But standing there with her arms folded, blocking the door, was the dorm supervisor. She said that she'd received reports about my behavior and that I had 1 week to move out of the dorm. I didn't understand. What had I done? Apparently, people had told her I wanted to get her fired. And then I remembered Joanna saying those exact words and asked me how she could report to the manager. So I'd sent her a text explaining how to report her. Oh my gosh, she'd even used that against me? This was too much. I went to find Joanna. I was furious. She was ruining my life. When I got to class, I planned to show everyone our full chat conversations, unedited. But I didn't get the chance because Joanna was sobbing hysterically, and everyone was comforting her. She was saying how living with me was torture, and that she had to take medication to deal with me. "Enough! How dare you!" I screamed. "Why are you doing this to me? What did I ever do to you?" Joanna, of course, started crying even louder, and everyone stared at me like they wanted to kill me. I walked out of there feeling completely empty. I'd lost my friends, my dorm, my reputation, and every last bit of dignity, all because of that snake. I still didn't know what I'd done wrong. The more I tried to understand it, the more everyone defended Joanna. It was useless. No one listened to me. Eventually, I ignored them all, moved out of the dorm, and acted like Joanna didn't exist. Fortunately, I made some new friends that loved and trusted me and never twisted my words. As for gossiping about me that everyone else still did, I learned to block it out. And then about 4 months later, I got an email from Joanna. I was shocked. She said, "Carrie, I'm sorry. You were right all along. Mitch was cheating on me, and I should have listened to you. Please forgive me. I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make it up to you. I'll confess to everyone. Please, let's just be friends again. I miss you." Ha! Not in a million years. I deleted the email right away. There was nothing that she could do to ever make it up to me. She'd ruined my life, and I was done with that toxicity. Good riddance.
It was just a regular school day, and I was sorting out my locker when suddenly I heard hushed whispers and noticed that everyone else was staring at something. Okay, so turns out it wasn't a something, but a someone, as this pretty girl strutted down the corridor like it was a runway or something. Ugh. Why was everyone gawping at her, rushing over to greet her, and sticking notepads in her face for her to sign? I hugged my books and muttered, "Geez, there's nothing special about her." So, my name's Lily, and I'm just a normal girl. My family, yeah, they're normal. My appearance, normal. And my social status, well, that's just normal too. I coast through life, and that's it. Nothing exciting ever happens to a regular girl like me. Oh, how I long to be the perfect looking girls on Instagram. They're so flawless in their clear skin, stylish clothes, and glossy hair. But those girls were different. They were from different worlds. Oh well, at least I still had my books, my bestie Sarah, and my cute boyfriend Brian. But this all changed when Stacy rocked up at school with her perfect looks and her "I'm so sweet and friendly" routine. Yeah, right. So, what if she had a prettyish face and a bit part in some TV show? Underneath the fake shine, she was clearly not all that. I walked into English class to see her sitting at the desk next to mine. Ugh, great. I couldn't even get to my seat because everyone else was surrounding her, asking her dumb questions such as, "What shampoo do you use?" and "Do you get snack breaks when you film your show?" Geez, give me a break instead. Then, when I finally managed to sit down, she smiled at me and in this sickly sweet voice said, "Hi, I hope it's okay I sit here. I'm Stacy." Yeah, sure. I forced a smile back, but on the inside, my anger was boiling over. Who did this girl think she was? So what if she was beautiful? I bet she only cared about her looks and never bothered studying. Yeah, everyone else would soon realize what a failure she was. Then, one time during recess, Stacy, the living Barbie doll, suggested we start a yearbook, and now everyone's treating her like she's achieved world peace or something. Ugh! You know the worst part of it? I've been saying we should start a yearbook for years, but no one listened to me. And guess who received so many welcome cards and love notes that they fell out of her locker and obstructed the hallway? Yup, Stacy. Gosh, it's been like weeks already. When will these stop? I hated how she thanked everyone and blushed and ugh. I needed to be around a sane person who didn't think the sun shone out of her. She was everywhere. It made me sick. But thank God for lunchtime. It became the only peaceful time of the day for me, when I could hang out with Sarah and not have to worry about Stacy. But, what was this? What was that Barbie doll doing sitting at our table and talking to my best friend? I walked over there and placed my tray down next to Sarah. "Oh, hi, Lily. Stacy just said the funniest thing." "Great," I muttered under my breath. Lunch was an ordeal. Sarah ignored me and kept on asking Stacy dumb questions like, Is your co-star Kyle as handsome in real life? And how do you style printed skirts with a colored tee? Yawn! Later that day, due to a paint spillage in art, I was 5 minutes late out. Sarah had agreed to drive me home, but I went out to the parking lot. Her car wasn't there. Then I checked my phone and saw that she'd messaged me. Where are you? I can't wait anymore. I'll leave first with Stacy. See you tomorrow, X. What? Is she ditching me to give that phony a ride? We had been friends since childhood. How could she be fooled for Stacy's act and just throw away our friendship like that? Angry, I messaged her back, you abandoned me for Little Miss Popular? How could you? I get it. New one in, old one out. Well, thanks a lot. My phone buzzed with her reply. Lily, you know it isn't like that. You live up the road from school while Stacy lives much further away and she needed to get back in time to get ready for her filming schedule. Madder than ever, I quickly typed out my reply. Whatever. It's too bad you'll always be a nobody in her eyes and she's just using you for a free ride. Then I checked my phone onto my bed. I'd had enough. Sarah had made her choice and it was to be friends with that fake over me. Sarah may have fallen into the Stacy trap, but at least I still had Brian, right? One afternoon, I was talking to him out in the schoolyard when Stacy tottered past. Even her try-too-hard walk was annoying. She smiled over my Brian, then she deliberately tripped up and dropped the books she was holding. I grabbed Brian's arm to stop him from going over, but he shook himself free from my grip and went over to her anyway. I watched him help her pick her books up, and then she blushed and squeaked out a "thank you." She was the worst. When he walked back over to me with this big grin on his face, I couldn't take it anymore. So I blurted out to him, "How dare you leave me to help her?" He gave me a confused look.
Lily, I was just helping her out.
Yeah, right. You knew she dropped them on purpose to get your attention, but you went over there to her anyway because you think she's prettier than me. He sighed.
You're being ridiculous. You know what? I can't deal with your selfish, jealous streak anymore. Let's just call it a day. We're done.
Then he walked off. I stood there watching him, expecting him to cool down and come back. Only he didn't. This was all Stacy's fault. She'd stolen my best friend and my boyfriend. No more. It was time to show her that she wasn't so perfect after all. I scrolled through her social media pages for ideas, and it soon became apparent that she loves boys with toned abs who ride motorbikes. How predictable. I discovered this website where I could hire a boy to play with her heart, then ditch her. It's about time she learned how much it sucked to be undesirable and worthless. Ha! I found the perfect guy called Josh. He was 19, a gym addict, and he had a motorbike. Whoa, he was expensive, but it would be worth it, right? I arranged to meet him at the local coffee shop, and geez, he was even more handsome in person. I wished I could use this money to actually make him mine. Sigh. So, the deal is, he's gonna flirt with Stacy, make her love him deeply, and then break up with her. The next Monday, I walked out of school to see Josh parked up to the school gate, holding his helmet and looking like he belonged in a movie. Naturally, every girl was staring at him, but he made a beeline for Stacy. Then, just 1 week later, I saw him picking up Stacy from the school. Whoa! I knew that! I knew I had chosen the right person. Josh was such a lady killer. They looked super close and I had to remind myself that he was just an actor and he was doing his job. Haha! She was gonna be so heartbroken. But a few weeks later, and he was still picking her up. Huh? Why hadn't he broken up with her yet? So I called him up and asked him what was taking him so long. He replied that he would do it soon. He was just making her fall for him more before he did it. Brutal. Only the weeks passed by and he still hadn't ended it. Then I was walking past the movie theater and I spotted them there, kissing. What? This was not the plan! Furious, I had arranged to meet him the next day at the coffee shop. He walked over and couldn't even meet my eye as he said,
I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. I will refund you as soon as I can.
Why? Have you fallen in love with her or something? I said jokingly. There was a long silence. Then he looked down at the table and muttered out,
Yeah, I have.
Why was I the only one on the planet who saw how fake she was? Thanks to her siren ways, I lost my best friend, my boyfriend, and now my savings. This was it. I needed to confront her. The next day at school, I tried finding her, but she was nowhere to be found. Then, as I passed through the school garden, I saw her sitting there. Gotcha! It's time to tell her exactly what I thought of her. I stormed over to her and opened my mouth to speak, but why was she crying? When she saw me, she managed to smile and said, "Oh, hi, Lily. Is there a chance you could help me?" I stared at her with disbelief. Did she think I was under her spell and would do her bidding? But then I saw what she was crying about. In her hands was her English essay with a big F on it. So I replied, why me? You're so smart. You answer all the questions in class correctly. I don't want to be judged on my bad grades. That's why I left my last school. The other kids call me a brainless beauty. I moved here for a fresh start, and now I'm still failing. Okay, so in that moment, I realized that there were things I was good at. My grades were good, and I was pretty great at remembering facts. I'd just been so blinded by jealousy that I lost focus on these things and only saw what I didn't have. None of this was Stacy's fault. She never actually done anything bad to me. I'd made it all up in my head because I was jealous of her. So I sat down next to her and said, "No one's gonna call you that because I'll help you study." "You will?" She gave me a hopeful smile and I nodded. "Thank you so much," she flung her arms around me. So that's how Stacy went from being my enemy to my friend. She's actually a really sweet and kind-hearted girl. No wonder why everyone admired her so much. And I was wrong to judge her on her appearance and not give her a fair chance. She's still with Josh and she doesn't know that I hired him to break her heart. But hey, she now has a hunky boyfriend who adores her, so that could be considered compensation, right? Brian and I are still over, but thinking about it, maybe this was for the best. I know I overreacted, but he gave me up so easily, and well, I want to find a guy who won't do that. As for Sarah, I went around to her house with a bag full of her favorite candy, and I apologized for being a jealous jerk. Luckily for me, she forgave me. Now, Sarah, Stacy, and I have become good friends. Sarah and I both help Stacy with her studies, and she gives us fashion tips. And you know what? I've come to realize that I'm pretty after all. I just needed to discover my spark. So finally, I learned that no one's perfect. Perfection is just an illusion. The most important thing is that we feel happy with what we own and never stop improving ourselves. So just be you and let everyone else concentrate on being them.
It was March 31st. A normal day, right? Well, yeah, but not tomorrow. Nope. As it was April Fool's Day. A prankster like me waits all year for that one day when I can play jokes on people without them getting in a mood with me. I've been planning my tricks for months, and boy oh boy, it's going to be so much fun. I turned to my best friend Aya and said with a devious smile, "Just you wait until tomorrow. My prank ideas are going to be legendary." I thought Aya would want to know more, but nope. She just blew her fringe out of her face, then sighed out, "Fleur, why don't you just give it a rest this year? Reality check. No one finds your pranks funny. Only uncomfortable and annoying." What? No way! That's not true. People love my pranks. Aya continued, "Do you remember your pencil prank on Luna last year?" I nodded and let out a snort. How could I forget that prank, as it had been so funny? I'd cut Luna's pencil in half, filled her pencil grip with ink, then assembled it back together just like new. And voila! Cue an ink explosion during an otherwise boring test. Luna cried a lot because she failed her biology test and had to retake it. I shrugged. So this was technically true, but it was still funny. And the time you swapped the cheerleading team's chant music for heavy metal and made a fool out of them at the basketball match? She frowned at me. Geez, stop being a fun killer. I'm making everyone's high school experience memorable. As, let's face it, no one will remember boring tests and tedious basketball matches otherwise. I was too busy talking to notice the ball whizzing through the air until it whacked me right on the head. Ouch! The world went black, and I collapsed. I opened my eyes to see Aya and some other kids gawping down at me. Then my teacher rushed over and shooed them off. "Fleur, are you okay?" Her and Aya helped me sit up, and while I rubbed my head, I replied, "Yeah, I'm fine, but I do feel a little dizzy." The teacher thought it would be best if I went home early, so she told Aya to take me back. I was so tired, but I knew sleeping when I might have a concussion was a bad idea, so I chilled out and watched a movie in my room until Mom came home from work. Okay, so my head hurt, and the room was still spinning, but there was no way I was going to let this small accident ruin my big day. I had planning to do, so I grabbed my notebook and checked through my prank ideas and prop list. The next morning, I woke up bright and early, and yay! The spinning had stopped. Whoa, today was the day. Let the pranking commence. I'd told Aya to meet me earlier, so I had time to set up my pranks. But to my annoyance, she showed up at the usual time. I hurried over to her and tapped my watch. "What time do you call this? Now I'm going to be behind schedule." She gave me a puzzled look. "For what? It's not April 1st anymore. Today is the 2nd. You had yesterday off because of your head bump, remember?" "What? What are you talking about?" "Look, it says today is April 1st. I waved my phone in her face. "Then your calendar is wrong. Check your settings or something. Now, let's go." She walked off. "No way. Don't think you can fool me," I said while trying to run after her. As soon as I arrived at school, I joined my friends in the canteen for breakfast, and Kelly looked at me and said, "How's the head?" I told her it was fine and passed her an Oreo. You know what? She ate it with no hesitation, but after one bite, she spat it into her hand. "Ew, what is that? Yuck!" I laughed at her and said, "Ha! That's toothpaste sandwiched between Oreo biscuits. Okay, I'm sorry. Drink this." Then I passed her a bottle of cola. She took a big gulp, then immediately spit it out. "Hey, this is so gross." Then she ran to the bathroom to clean her mouth. "Yep, I put soy sauce in that bottle." I followed her to the bathroom to check on her and found her rinsing her mouth out under the tap. When she finished, she frowned at me and said, "Fleur, this isn't funny. I thought you only did these stupid pranks on April 1st. Now I have to put up with my stinky soy sauce breath all day." I rolled my eyes, then smirked. "Yeah, as if it's not April 1st today." "It's not. What's wrong with you? It's the 2nd. Then she stormed off. Wait, what? What did she mean it was the 2nd? No way. Anyways, seeing as I was already in there, I decided I may as well carry out another prank. I pulled out my Nutella jar and went into one of the cubicles and waited until another girl went into the one next door. I asked her, "Hey, excuse me, my friend, do you have toilet paper in there?" She was nice and replied, "Sure." Then she passed it to me. I quickly put some Nutella on my hand, then rubbed it over her hand too. Oops! Oh boy, she screamed so loudly, and I couldn't hold my laugh. "Ew, what the hell? So disgusting, you freak!" Then she ran out to wash her hand. I stepped out. "Relax, girl. It was just a prank for Fool's Day. Just Nutella." But she sneered back. "You're crazy, and it's the 2nd already. Jeez, what's wrong with you?" Then she left. Okay, this was so weird. Why was everyone acting like it was April 2nd? On the way to class, I rechecked my phone. Yep, it said April 1st. Okay, I got it. This was everyone's dumb attempt to fool me. Well, nice try, but it so wasn't working. As it was the 1st, which meant it was time for math class. I took my seat in class and waited, but, why did Mr. Simmons, the chemistry teacher, walk in? He told us to prepare for our next lesson in the lab. What was going on? I was so confused. That was tomorrow's schedule, right? Then he sat down in the chair without any suspicion and a big fart sound came. I laughed so much my sides hurt. I couldn't believe it. I do this every year, but they fall for it each time. But hang on, why was everyone so quiet? I looked around and realized I was the only one laughing. Oh, come on, everybody. It was fun. The typical joke for April Fools. Mr. Simons held up the fart pillow and gave me a stern look. Fleur, I don't expect this behavior from someone your age, especially seeing as it's not even April Fool's Day anymore. And can you believe it? All my classmates agreed with him. No way! Everyone was crazy. No, it is. I know it is. You're all lying, I replied in a panic before I gathered up my stuff and ran out of the classroom. I really needed some space to think this through. It was all so crazy. I couldn't have zoned out for an entire day. Could I? Or the ball hit me so hard that I lost my memory? I remember having dinner, then staying up late to plan out my pranks, and I know I was tired, but no way. They were the crazy ones, not me. Anyway, lab time. I was the last one to walk in, and I sat down at my bench and started on the experiment. I guess I wasn't focusing properly as I poured the chemical into the beaker, and boom! The next thing I knew, I was covered in this weird green powder stuff. Still, no one was laughing. Instead, they were all staring at me and asking if I was okay. Then Mr. Simons asked them all, "Why is this chemical bottle here? What a mistake!" Embarrassed, I ran to the bathroom to clean my face. Geez, I looked like the Grinch. It was super tricky to scrub off. Ugh! I hoped I wouldn't be stuck with this color forever. But was it someone's prank on me? But if that's the case, then why did no one laugh? I sure would have laughed at me if I was them. Finally, the green powder started to come off, and then I went back to class. On top of my backpack was a folded-up note with my name on it. Huh. I opened it. Hi, Fleur. There's something important I want to tell you. Meet me in the hall after class. Devin, X. My heart instantly fluttered. I'd had a crush on Devin for, forever. But, oh, I got this. This had to be a prank. Everybody knew I liked him, so they did all of this to embarrass me. Devin must be involved this time. I glanced over at him, and he smiled, then gave me this cute wave. Whatever, this was definitely too good to be true. Enough. I wasn't going to let everyone laugh at me anymore. So, as I followed Devin to the hall, I took a sip of water, but I kept it in my mouth. Then, when Devin stopped walking and turned to face me, I squirted the water up into the air like an elephant, then said, "Ha! Gotcha! I'm no fool." He wiped his face onto the back of his sleeve, then looked me straight in the eye and said, "Fleur, I have feelings for you. I waited until today to tell you, as I didn't want to do it yesterday on April Fool's Day, as you'd probably think it was a joke. So why do that to me?" I stared at him speechless. The highlighted words that I'd heard were feelings, yesterday, and April Fool's Day. I started laughing a fake laugh, but then it turned awkward, 'cause his serious expression didn't budge. "You're kidding, right?" I muttered out, but he looked totally devastated. Oh no, I didn't want to upset Devin. I was just confused with days and, as if I actually missed April Fool's Day. What a bummer! I realized my prank had gone too far, and how it could have hurt his feelings, so I blurted out, "Devin, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. It's the concussion. I'm delirious. I'm so sorry." Then came an awkward silence. Suddenly, Devin's sad look changed into a smirk, and he began to laugh. Then everyone jumped out of nowhere and started laughing too. I stood there with a gormless expression on my face. Then Aya appeared and said, "Gotcha!" So it turns out it was actually April the 1st, and I hadn't actually missed a day. Nope, this was Aya's ingenious idea for everyone to get their own back on me. Last night, she created a group on Facebook and added everyone in the class, including the teachers, to plan today's prank. No, this couldn't be possible. I was the pranking queen, not them. Then Aya sidled up to me and said, "Hey Fleur, guess what? It's still April Fool's Day." The next thing I knew, I was grinning at her. Then I play hit her arm and started to laugh. I guess that they had fooled me good. After that, I didn't carry out any more pranks, I was just happy to have a chilled rest of the day. Then, when I was walking home, Devin caught up with me and said, "Floor, I'm sorry. But actually, not everything was a joke today." I smiled and looked at him. "Oh yeah? So, what's not a joke?" But he just turned tomato red, then rushed away. I stood there blushing as I watched him hurry off. Did this mean Devin really likes me? Interesting. Maybe this April Fool's Day wasn't such a fail after all.
Hey, Dan, how about we go to that Japanese restaurant I want to try?
But my mom's expecting me home for dinner.
Dan awkwardly replied. Again? I rose an eyebrow. Predictably, his next move was taking out his phone and calling Mommy Dearest.
Mom says eating out is very expensive. It's your idea, so you're paying, okay?
Excuse me? Did I mishear him? Unbelievable. So, through gritted teeth, I said, "Forget it. I'm going home." Then I left him standing there with a stupid look on his face. Yep, that idiot was my boyfriend, Dan. He's in his 20s, but every conversation is still, my mom this and my mom that. It's so exhausting. At first, I thought I'd found a manly, impeccable man to rely on. Instead, it just goes to show you can't judge a book by its cover, y'all. It all started with me coming back to the country, and it was hard finding my feet here again. Also, I hadn't had a boyfriend for, let's say, a long time. I wasn't that desperate, but my auntie insisted on matchmaking me with this cute guy. I thought, why not? First impressions, Dan was fine. He'd just graduated from a prestigious college, and he seemed so gentle and kind. We spent a good time chit-chatting, so yeah, after that we started dating. It was swell at first, but then the abnormal details about him began to surface. We arranged a date at mine once. The plan was to cook a meal together, then relax watching a movie. But as soon as he arrived, he walked straight over to the couch and started watching TV without any helpful intention. I dragged him into the kitchen, passed him a carrot and the peeler. He looked confused, then stuttered, but I don't know how. I tried to show him, but despite explaining it in great detail, Dan still fumbled to peel one lousy carrot. Then, yep, you guessed it, at one point he called his mom. Then he told me, "My mom says the kitchen is a very dangerous place. I could cut or burn myself. We could go back to my place. My mom can do the cooking." I glared at his arms akimbo. Or we can eat out," Dan mumbled. "Only if it's on you, Claire. It's not my fault." I growled while shaking my head. "Fine, then I'm not coming with you." Then I pushed him out and slammed the door shut behind him. What the hell just happened? Still, I told myself that maybe he was just scared, since he has never cooked before. One time we were in a clothes shop, and I spotted this shirt that I knew would suit him. It wasn't his usual style, but I insisted he tried it on, and ooh, he looked so good in it. Dan seemed to like it too, as he admired himself in the mirror, then said, "It does look nice, but wait, can you please take a photo so I can send it to my mom? Well, she's the one who buys all my clothes, so..." What? So now he needed approval from his mom before he bought anything? Jeez. Anyway, I took a couple of photos and he sent them to his mom. They exchanged messages, then he turned to me and said, "Okay, Mom says you can buy me it." Me? My eyes widened. "Yeah, Mom says you chose it, so you should buy it for me." Wait, what? I literally froze for seconds. Speechless, I could only glare at him before I found the means to leave. "Claire, what's wrong?" Dan chased after me, but I ignored him. Okay, I admit that after a few dates, it was easy to figure out he was a total mommy's boy. But I told myself that it was sweet he loved his mom so much, and I never expected it to be that extreme. After that, I used the silent treatment on him, but he wouldn't quit bugging me. Then, he told me he wanted to take me out to my favorite restaurant as a birthday treat. Ooh, this sounded great! Perhaps he'd realized something and wanted to make it up for me. We were holding hands and walking toward the restaurant when we passed by a shoe store, and in the window display were the perfect pair of boots. Well, I'm a girl, and it was my birthday. I pulled Dan's arm. Danny, look! I pointed at the boots. I want those. I grinned from ear to ear.
Okay,
Dan replied blandly. My smile faded. I mean, they'd make the best birthday present. Ugh, since when did a girl like me have to ask for a gift?
Why?
Dan shrugged.
You like them, I don't.
My face reddened with anger. But it's my birthday. Dan scratched his head and forced a smile.
Sorry, babe. Last night I spent my allowance on some new games, so I'm broke now.
Pfft, I sneered. Why don't you ask your mom? And he unexpectedly went mad.
Hey, you're obviously the wealthier one. How come you keep asking me to buy you stuff?
Enough! I stopped dead. I have never, ever dated anyone as awful as you before. You're a grown-ass man, so stop running to your mommy every time you forget how to turn the kettle on or stub your toe. And why on earth do you still get an allowance at your age? It's over. Then I turned to leave, without letting him have the last word. So freaking unreal. Trust me, to arrive back in the country and end up straight into this bizarre mommy's boy circumstance. But yeah, at least I was finally free of him now. It's been a few weeks since then, but just the thought of Dan still made me so mad. Ugh, I needed to get out of here and live a little. So I called my close friend Philip and arranged to meet him and some of my trusted guy friends at a bar.
Cheer up, little girl, he teased. I know what will put a smile on your face. Our gaming group found this hilarious player. All we have to do is throw a few compliments his way, and he buys us all new items. Then, whenever we go out partying after a victory, this noob also pays for it all. What an ego.
I mocked, Congrats, bros. Wish my ex-date was also that generous. Then I rolled my eyes. He never spent a cent. Well, at least not without asking his mom for permission first. Philip laughed with a surprise.
Hey, this noob's the same. He brags that despite being broke, his mom came up with the idea of matching him with rich girls so he can be covered.
Hold up. That didn't sound right. I had a real bad feeling about this. Then Philip pointed across the bar and said,
Oh, speak of the devil,
and patted my back. A chill ran down my spine as I took a deep inhale of breath and turned to see it was Dan. And oh, he had a new girlfriend already. I quickly made up some excuse and bailed before they saw me. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Dan's new girlfriend. Whatever Dan and his mom were doing was no less than scamming. So, I arranged to meet up with Philip at a diner, and I confided in him about my history with Dan and how I was concerned about his new girlfriend. Philip offered to help and said he would try and find out more information. A few days later, he reported back with his findings. Turns out, Dan and his mom had learned the Claire lesson, so this time with his new girlfriend, Lizzie, they were playing it differently. Dan, as his mom had ordered, took some sensitive photos of Lizzie, and now every time she refused to pay for something, he threatened to post them online. OMG! This made me feel so sick. This poor girl was trapped and were sucked dry of all her money. This was extortion, and I was going to put a stop to it. It didn't take long for me to find Lizzie online. I then dropped her a message saying I wanted to help, and we arranged to meet up in person. After hearing me say that I knew the truth, Lizzie burst into tears. I can't let those pictures get out, so I have to keep on being his girlfriend and pay for everything. She rubbed the tears off her cheeks. I had to borrow money, and now the interest means I'm in thousands of dollars worth of debt, and I still have no guts to speak out. Let's put an end to this. I slammed my fist on the table. Be brave, Lizzie. I've got your back. The day after Philip and I went with Lizzie to tell her parents, it was bad. Her mom started blubbering and tried to cover her face while her dad went furious.
No one does this to my little girl and gets away with it.
Philip replied.
Too right, the bad guys are going down.
We spent the rest of the day gathering evidence, including all of the threatening messages Dan had sent her and the receipts she'd kept from the extortionate purchases he'd forced her to make for him. That was when Lizzie received a message from Dan.
There's this expensive restaurant I want to go to. Babe, take me there tonight or else. Love you, X.
Lizzie replied that she agreed. Then, knowing Dan was out, we went around to his house. We confronted Dan's mom as soon as she let us inside. She was frightened and eventually confessed that she didn't have a job and it was Dan's dad who provided for them. As a result, she spoiled Dan so badly that it annoyed his dad, so he left. Then she sadly blurted out, "He didn't say a word to me. He just left Dan a note that said, 'Take care of yourself and your mom.' I knew Dan would be miserable without his luxuries, so I told him to find a rich girlfriend to spoil him, and this time," she looked from me to Lizzie, "to make sure she would be too trapped to ever leave." There was a knock at the door. She looked at us awkwardly before she went to answer it. We followed her, and that was when we saw 2 cops arresting her. She bursted into tears as they took her away. I guess she thought she was a devoted mother who was doing right by her son, when, in truth, she went about it in totally the wrong way. She ended up going to jail, and her house was sold to pay off Lizzie's debts. As for Mommy's boy Dan, as an accomplice, he ended up doing community restitution. Hey, this would probably do him some good, as he'd finally learn what a day's hard work actually felt like. Thankfully, Lizzie gradually got over this traumatizing event and was ready to start dating again. With Philip. About me, well, I'm still single, but I don't feel lonely anymore, as I have awesome friends. Besides, this way I have no guys bumming money off me.
Hey, you! Quit standing there and come clean my locker already! You're destined to be a maid, just like your mom! Suddenly, a whole group of kids erupted into laughter, and I just froze. I glanced back, wondering how they knew my secret, but then I realized they were mocking some other girl. Phew, what a relief! This new school seemed intense, and when I walked into the classroom, 3 of my new classmates wouldn't stop staring at me, but I just ignored them. But at lunch, one of them came over to me and said, "I guess your family is super rich, right?" I didn't know what to say, so I just replied with, no, they're kinda normal. Why? Then he raised his voice. "How dare you try to sit here then? This is our table. Move!" I immediately got up and ran to an empty seat on the corner table. That's when some kid told me that the 3 rich kids were Brent, Sophia, and Jasmine. He told me that the best way to stay out of trouble was to avoid them at all costs, because their parents basically funded the whole school, and so everyone had to respect them. But I couldn't avoid them, because the very next day, Sophia came running up to me and said, "Why do you keep your family a secret? Come on, spill!" I freaked out. Why did she suddenly ask me that? But then Jasmine appeared and said, "Girl, that bag you wore yesterday is totally sold out. How did you get your hands on one?" Oh, right. They were probably talking about my Insta post from yesterday. And so I said, "Oh, my dad bought it for me in Paris." Sophia's eyes went wide and she said, "OMG, your dad is so cool. Why are you wearing it today?" Shoot. They were going to catch me out. I had to think fast. My parents don't want me to show it off, so they said I can't bring it to school. Sophia and Jasmine burst out laughing and said my family sounded cool but weird. If only they knew the truth. The bag wasn't even mine. It was just from a modeling job I did to make some extra pocket money. In fact, my parents were super poor. My mom worked as a maid, and my dad was a security guard. Obviously, I couldn't afford fancy designer bags, but the rich kids didn't need to know that, right? At lunch, I saw them walking towards my table, and Brent said, "What do your parents do?" "Just tell us. We won't tell anyone." I told them my dad was the CEO of a big fashion company, and my mom worked at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I wasn't proud of my lie, but the alternative was being treated like the girl I saw on my first day at this school, and I didn't want that at all. They all looked amazed, and Jasmine said, "That makes sense why you're so pretty and smart." Then Brent jumped in and said, "But then why are you a scholarship kid, I just smiled and kept quiet. I couldn't think of a good lie and didn't want to take this any further. I thought they would leave me alone after that, but they kept approaching me and even started to ask me to join them at their rich kids' table. I couldn't say no, but when they asked me to hang out on weekends, I made up excuses. Not because I didn't want to join, but because there was no way on earth I could afford it. I didn't even dare to ask my parents, as they were working so hard to save up for my college tuition. I was so afraid of my lies catching up with me, so whenever I modeled for high-end stuff, I'd post a pic to my Insta. One time, I shared a photo of me wearing super expensive heels and captioned it, "Thanks, Dad. Love you." Sometimes, I even took it to the next level and edited travel photos, so it looked like I'd spend the weekend in Paris. And one time, I even photoshopped me driving in a Lamborghini. It was a lot of effort, but it was better than being mocked for being poor, like what happened to me in my last school. I couldn't go through that again. One time, I decided to go shopping with them, and it was crazy to watch them buying everything in sight without even thinking about it. I couldn't even dream of a life like that. But when we got to the bag shop, Jasmine pointed to a fancy-looking bag and said she'd bought it yesterday. Then she asked me, "You probably already have it, right?" I just grinned and said, "Yep, my mom bought it for me last time she was in Milan." But then Jasmine said, "Yay! Okay, cool. So let's both wear them on Monday. Everyone will be jealous." That weekend, I felt sick. I had to buy that bag. I decided to raid my piggy bank, but when I got to the shop, I realized I only had 1/10 of the amount needed. I was so shocked. Who would spend that much on a bag? While I was standing there, a woman came in and bought it without hesitation. Why was it so easy for rich people? I decided to follow her just out of curiosity and saw her going to the restroom. I couldn't believe it. She just left her new bag by the sink and then went into the cubicle. I looked around and saw the coast was clear, so I quickly grabbed the bag and walked out of the restroom. I ignored the guilt about stealing it from her and headed home. All I could think about was what would happen if I walked up to school on Monday without the bag. But as soon as I reached my room, the regret was eating away at me. Would I go to jail if they find out? My parents would kill me. Well, Monday morning rolled around, and I proudly wore my new bag to school. Brent, Jasmine, and Sophia were so surprised and said I had the limited edition version, which was twice the price as the normal one. This made me feel even more guilty, but from the looks I got all day, it was worth it. Everyone saw me as one of the rich kids now. Soon it would be summer vacation, and Brent said he had a holiday house in Hawaii and suggested we all go for 1 week together. No way I could afford that, so I lied and said I had to go to Paris with my dad for an event. But then Jasmine said her parents were away, so we could have a party at her house instead that weekend. She suggested we dress up and said she couldn't wait to see my clothes I wore outside of school. Oh no, I was dreading this. Brent said he would pick me up at home and drive me there, but I told him to meet me at school instead, as my parents were so strict. Oh my gosh, all of this lying was making me feel exhausted. But no way could I let them see my dilapidated old house, especially as I'd lied and told them we lived in a villa with a pool and golf course. My lying was becoming a big problem. I mean, where would I get a dress from? I lay there worrying about it, and suddenly I heard my parents talking in their room. My mom was saying she'd finally saved enough to send me to college and asked my dad if he could deposit it in their bank tomorrow, as she had to work at some party. Then she said she'd been keeping it in her closet for safekeeping. I thought about it for a while. I mean, the money was for me anyways, right? So what harm would it do if I just took it now? The next morning, I snuck into their room and took all of the money and rushed out to the mall to buy a gorgeous purple dress and sparkly shoes. This was absolutely the life that I deserved. After that, I took an Uber to school, where Brent, Jasmine, and Sophia picked me up. I had like a million missed calls from my mom and dad, but I ignored it and turned my phone off. I just wanted to enjoy a full day living like a true rich kid. Brent drove us towards Hampton's Country Club, and I couldn't believe it. Jasmine's family owned this place. Wow! When we arrived, a valet came over, but Brent was so rude to him, he shouted at him and said, "Listen, buddy, this car cost $4 million. If you even leave one tiny mark, you'll be paying for it for the rest of your life." I turned around to see the valet's reaction. Then my jaw almost hit the floor. It was my dad! He saw me and looked surprised, but before he could say anything, we walked off. We hung out in the country club for a bit. Then in the evening, we drove to Jasmine's house. Her place was insane. She had a tennis court, her own cinema, and don't even get me started on how many cars her family owned. We sat down to eat in the dining room, and I kid you not, there were 4 maids waiting to serve us. We each had our own one. I was too busy being shocked to notice my maid walking towards me. But then I heard a familiar voice. "Sweetie, what are you doing here?" "Mom?" I was horrified. The party she'd mentioned yesterday. This was the party. Oh no, this was a disaster. Jasmine looked surprised and said, "Do you know her?" So I said, "Oh, she used to be a maid at our house." My mom looked crushed and said, "A maid? How could you say that?" Then Jasmine got annoyed and said, "Don't you dare speak to my guest like that. Get out of my sight." My mom ran off, almost in tears, and for the next little while, Brent and Sophia treated her terribly too. Brent even asked her to clean his shoes. My mom was being treated like this all because of me. I could see she was really upset, and she accidentally dropped some sauce on Jasmine's dress. And then Jasmine just lost it. She pushed my mom and screamed, "Are you crazy? Do you know how much this dress cost?" Well, that was it. I'd had enough. I ran over and helped her up. "Mom, are you okay?" "Mom?" Jasmine, Brent, and Sophia all shouted. So I said, "Yes, she is my mom. And how dare you treat her like that?" Tears were pouring down my cheeks, and I felt so humiliated. Needless to say, they kicked us out, and Jasmine even threw some $10 bills at us and said, "Take it. Go back to your broken-down house. You're stinking up our air." I couldn't stop crying. It was exactly how they treated that girl on my first day at school. I didn't have much choice but to tell my parents the truth. That I'd lied to everyone, stolen the bag, and even stolen their money just so I could pretend to be rich. I'd never been so ashamed in all my life, especially after everything my parents had done for me. It took some time, but they eventually forgave me, and we moved to a small town out in the countryside so I could start at a new school. I never wanted to see those rich kids again. Now, I'm working hard to finish school and save enough money for college, and I've realized that being rich didn't even make me happy. My family might be poor, but they're the nicest people I've ever met. And you can't buy that in any designer shop. You see that sad girl sitting there in a flood of tears? Yeah, I know, she's pretty hard to miss. Well, that was me a few months ago. My boyfriend had literally just broken up with me, and I had to pack my stuff out of his place ASAP with a resentful heart. But thinking back, if he hadn't broken my heart, I wouldn't have fallen into this super awkward and ridiculous situation. Oh, I forgot. I'm Ava. I'm 22 and I suck at love. So anyway, after crying like a newborn, I realized I needed a trip away to free my mind, just like Julia Roberts' character did in the movie Eat, Pray, Love. But I could only afford to do the low-budget version. So I went on Airbnb and found a reasonably priced room to rent in this idyllic beach house. And it gets even better. The owner, Hazel is out most of the time, so it would be like renting the whole house with the price of one room. Awesome! Reserved! I needed to get out of this emotional hellhole ASAP. As expected, Hazel wasn't home when I arrived, and I had to find the hidden key under a plant pot by the door and let myself in. And oh my, it was like stepping into a life-size retro dollhouse. From the chic furniture to the funky wallpaper, I loved it here. This Hazel girl has got some taste. Ooh, there was even a record player. If I'd have known, I would have brought my vinyls with me. But hey, her collection wasn't too shabby. I have to admit that the idea of having a cool friend like this Hazel girl sounded pretty awesome. I was determined to actually meet her because, yeah, it's been 5 wonderful days staying here and I still haven't run into her. So one night, I settled down in the living room and watched a movie while waiting for her to come home. She eventually showed up at 2 a.m. Ugh, this girl wasn't kidding about coming home late. I greeted her and said, "Hey, I saw you have an Exacta 35mm film camera. That's so cool. Also, would you mind if I take a look at your vinyls?" She looked a bit confused and replied, "I have a what?" "Oh, you mean those rusty old things? They're my brother's. I doubt he'd mind. He always talks to me nonstop about them. So I think he'd be happy there's someone in this house who speaks the same language as him." Ha! Oh, they're her brothers? How very interesting. This got me thinking. Is he handsome? And what about his personality? Is he an arty type with a kind soul? Daydreaming about this mystery guy became a regular occurrence for me. Oh gosh, was I crushing on a guy I'd never even met? How desperate was I? One day I came home from grocery shopping. I was totally exhausted. So I threw the groceries in the kitchen and jumped straight onto the pile of blankets on my bed. Only it wasn't just the simple blankets. What? Someone was under them. We banged heads. Ouch! I removed the blankets to catch this pervert out. Huh? I know this guy. It was my ex. What in God's name was he doing here? Oh, for the record, this wasn't my current ex. This was Nolan. We used to date back in high school, but I'd not spoken to him in a long time. So it turns out he's Hazel's mystery brother. Ew. This whole time I'd been accidentally crushing on my jerky ex-boyfriend. This made sense now, as we always did have lots in common, but ugh. Thank you, universe, for ruining my vacation. With a dagger stare, I asked him why he had the audacity to be napping in my bed. He snorted, then said, "Your bed? This is my house, in my room. The question is, what are you doing here?" Reluctantly, I explained everything to him, and it turns out he was meant to be away on a 2-month business trip, so Hazel put his room on Airbnb without asking him. The problem being, he came back early. He just shrugged and said, "But I'm home now, so can you please take your stuff and get out of here? I'll get Hazel to refund you or whatever." This made me mad. I'd paid for the room. I had rights, so I was staying put. So I told him, "I'm not going anywhere. You'll just have to sleep on the couch." He didn't seem happy about it. In fact, he grumbled to himself as he left the room. But at least he left. I thought this would be it, but oh, how wrong I was. And that's when the war for the bedroom began. The next morning, I awoke to hear these weird squawking noises. Then I felt something flap in my face. Sleepily, I tried to whack it away and opened my eyes. Staring back at me was this massive gull. Ugh! Nolan! There were about a dozen of them hanging out in my room, all pecking and flapping around my stuff. It took me over an hour to shoo them out of the window. Afterward, I was so mad that I locked myself in the bathroom. After 30 minutes, Nolan thudded on the door. He urgently needed to use it. I opened the door with a smirk on my face and brushed past him. I soon heard his disgruntled shouts. Yep, I'd wrapped the toilet paper with duct tape. Ha! I wasn't done with him yet, so that evening I hid some cookie crumbs on the couch, and he woke up the next day covered in ant bites. He was like a real-life dot-to-dot. Yes, it's 2-1, loser. This went on for a couple of days. Nolan switched the toaster settings, so my breakfast was ruined. Yuck. So I sneakily downloaded a fake cracked screen app on his phone and placed it on the floor. When he picked up his phone, he totally freaked out and started blaming his dog. It was so funny. All this pranking was exhausting, so I was kind of relieved when Nolan went out one night, and I could just chill on the couch and watch a movie. Suddenly, the power went out. Great. The switch must have tripped or something. I put on the torch on my phone and was about to go and check it out when my phone rang. All I could hear was someone deep breathing into it. What the hell? I hung up and my body started to shake. All of a sudden, the door burst open and Ghostface was standing there. Terrified, I held my head and screamed like a banshee. But then I heard somebody call my name. Ava! Ava! It's me, Nolan. It's okay. I was so relieved to see him that I jumped into his arms and cried into his sweater. Please don't cry. I've got you, he said in a soft voice while he held me. I felt so secure and safe. What was that he was holding in his hand? It was a ghost face mask. It was him! He knew I hated horror movies. What a jerk! I pushed him away and shouted, "What the hell? Are you crazy?" He just smiled and replied, "It was worth it, 'cause the hug was so sweet." Man, I hate this jerk. After that, I avoided him. So, okay, I did catch myself looking over at him and getting this weird, warm feeling. One time, he was playing with his dog on the beach, and I watched on from the porch. Did I have a crush on my ex? My God, I hope not, 'cause that would be pathetic. But I had to admit that, although his pranks were really annoying, they'd also been kind of fun. It made me reminisce on the old days when we were together, and we were so happy back then. But nothing lasts forever. Hazel appeared with 2 cups of coffee, and we started chatting. I told her how annoying her brother was. She laughed, then replied, "I know, sorry. I didn't know you guys used to date. I wouldn't have rented the room to you if I had. I get that it must be awkward for you, especially as you were the one who broke up with him, right?" I did what? He was the one who broke up with me because he was moving away at the time and couldn't handle the long-distance relationship. And worse, he did it over a freaking letter. She looked at me confused, then said, "Oh, that's peculiar, as he told me he wrote you a letter telling you about his feelings. Then you shouted at him that it was over." I replied, "Part of his letter said, 'I love you and all, but this long-distance stuff is like madly scary.' So it kind of seemed obvious to me that he wanted to end things." She shook her head. "No, I swear he just wanted to tell you how much he loved you. But obviously, my dearest brother totally sucks at writing. What an idiot. I told him he should have let me proofread his dumb love letter." So it turns out our breakup had all been a misunderstanding. I mean, come on, who writes love letters anymore? Anyway, the past was the past, so I decided it was best to leave it there. Besides, I only had a few days left here. On my last day, I packed my things and said goodbye to Hazel. I had to admit that I was really gonna miss it here. Nolan was nowhere to be found. He must be celebrating 'cause he finally had his room back. Whatever, it's not like I needed to say goodbye to him. I took a cab to the train station. On the way, I couldn't shake Nolan out of my head. He needed to know the truth about the breakup. I couldn't let him think that I was a cruel person back then. "Stop! Turn around!" I shouted out to the cab driver. I ran back into the house. Hazel stared at me in shock. Why aren't you at the train station?" Oh, wow. I couldn't believe they wanted to get rid of me so fast. I was about to leave when Hazel continued. "Nolan just took a cab there to talk to you. Let me call him." Nolan answered the phone and asked me to meet him at a lighthouse nearby. Oh gosh, I was so nervous. What did he want to tell me? Maybe Hazel had told him about our convo the other morning. I spotted him. He was holding something. Gee, I hoped it wasn't another letter. He blushed while looking at me. Then he said in a shy voice, You forgot something in my room." Then he handed me a bag. I opened it, and there was my lingerie! Oh, great! How could I forget them? So he wasn't going to tell me anything. But wait a minute. These weren't mine. And they still had the tags on. He giggled and said, "Sorry, I swear that was the last prank. I just needed a reason to see you. Hazel told me everything. I don't blame you for our breakup. I blame my poor writing skills. The point is, I love you. I just love you. You're the only girl I've ever loved. Still to this day. I've never loved anyone else." Oh gosh, I couldn't believe it. Although I was pretty sure he'd just quoted that from a movie or series or something. As we all know, he sucks with words, and it sounded familiar. Anyway, I threw the bag of lingerie in his face and then wrapped my arms around him. So, from then on, the room war stopped. Not because I was leaving, but because we became roommates. Let me tell you this. Actually, there's not much to tell. Only, when your boyfriend writes you a letter, please make sure you read it very carefully. Actually, scrap that. Just tell him to get with the times and to text you. I kicked off my heels and threw my handbag down on the table. Geez, I'm so tired. Should I quit this job? I thought out loud. I hoped my friends were home, as I needed to vent. I was about to lie down on the couch when I suddenly saw a shadow go toward the bathroom. I took a closer look. There was a man doing something in my bathroom. Was our place getting robbed? Panicked, I grabbed one of my heels, then rushed forward and hit him with it. "Thief! Thief! Hazel! Ivy! Thief!" I shouted out as I continued to slam my heel into him. He held his head and kept saying, You misunderstood! I'm not—" Suddenly, my two friends rushed over, but instead of helping me tackle the intruder, they pulled me off of him. "Maya, stop!" Hazel said hastily. "He's with us." Oops. I put my heel down and gave a sheepish look. "Well, thanks for the heads up." Then Hazel asked the guy if he was okay. He didn't say anything. Instead, he just glared at me before he walked out of the room. Suddenly, Hazel and Ivy were pulling me toward the kitchen table for a chat. So apparently, they decided to find a new tenant, and this Wesley guy was the chosen one. Geez, it would have been nice if they'd run it past me first. I mean, I did live here. I frowned at them, told them they sucked, and that I didn't want to live with some random guy. "Maya, we didn't tell you because we knew you'd act like this," Hazel sighed. "But with the rent increase, we have no choice but to bring someone new into the mix. Besides, you have to admit that Wesley is nice to look at," Ivy said in a dreamy voice. "Whatever," I crossed my arms. "And no, I don't think he's in the slightest bit good-looking." Hazel grinned as she said, "No, because he now has heel imprints all over his head." I rolled my eyes, then grabbed my handbag and headed toward my room. I didn't want to live with some dumb guy. But thanks to my totally unreasonable friends, I didn't have much choice. The next day was Saturday. Thank God. So I slept until noon, then lazily went down to the kitchen to get some leftover pizza. Huh? Where was it? I knew Ivy and Hazel were too calorie-obsessed to touch it. It could only be Wesley. He was watching TV in the living room, so I went over to him and asked loudly, "Did you eat my pizza? How dare you?" Without looking away from his show, he said, "Yeah, I threw it in the trash." He did what? Then he continued, "You left it in the fridge to go bad and spoil all the other foods. Please don't do that again." Huh, where was my apology? He'd thrown away my lunch, and now he dared to challenge me? How annoying! I was about to give him a piece of my mind when he handed me something and said, "I made a list of house rules." I looked at the first 3 rules. Number 1, wash up all your dirty dishes straight after use, then thoroughly clean the basin. Number 2, Write your initials on all your food and drinks and don't steal anyone else's. Number 3, shower time is 10 minutes maximum. Then clean the bathroom before leaving. What? Was this guy for real? Who in their right mind had the time or patience to write their initials on everything? I frustratingly replied to him, "No way am I—" Wesley interrupted me. 4 people are living here, so the majority vote goes. I smirked at him. I knew for sure that Hazel and Ivy would never accept those stupid rules. They liked the messy, grab-it-and-go lifestyle even more than me, and Ivy spent at least an hour in the shower. So we all gathered in the living room, and Wesley handed out his rules. But to my surprise, Ivy only flicked out her hair, then said, "Okay, Wesley." And Hazel fluttered her eyelashes and said, "Sure, these rules seem great." Geez, what was wrong with these girls? He wasn't even that handsome. Unfortunately, my love-struck friends' votes meant that I was outnumbered. I had no choice but to follow Wesley's ridiculous rules. The trash takeout rotation was so confusing. What was wrong with leaving it to overflow? I missed my slot, so Wesley stuck a Post-it note to my door saying, "Take the trash out at 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and 7 p.m. on the other days. It's not difficult, W." Ugh, who even used Post-it notes in this day and age? He was such a loser! Also, I have this box for my random items, hair slides, pins, keepsake tickets, scarves, and so on, which I kept in the living room. It didn't matter where I moved it. Wesley shook his head and mouthed the word no at me. Yep, you guessed it. He stuck another Post-it note to my door, this one saying, "No personal clutter in the communal areas, W." In the end, I stuck the box into my closet so it was out of the way. Living with Wesley was a nightmare, especially when I finally quit my job at that lame law firm, which means I had to stay home with him pretty much all the time. This guy was just too meticulous. If any of us dared place anything in the wrong place, he glared at us and said, "That isn't where it lives." Couldn't I put the TV remote on the arm of the couch if I wanted to? I pay rent too. I didn't want to live in a model home. One time, I was chilling in my room when I turned around to see Wesley standing there. He looked around my messy room, shook his head, then picked up my bra from the floor. I immediately snatched it out of his hand and hid it. How embarrassing! "Hey, why is your room so untidy?" He tutted, then grunted out before leaving. "Clean up right now." How dare he come into my room and order me about? I stomped out to the living room to confront him about it. But before I could do so, I was dumbfounded at the sight of Ivy and Hazel in the middle of a cleaning frenzy. Ivy smiled over at Wesley and said, "Isn't this shiny?" Then Hazel asked him, "Do you need me to move anything?" Jeez, it was like they had a spell cast on them or something. Then Wesley looked at me and said, "Maya, your friends have grasped the importance of keeping our living environment clean. So, why can't you?" Fine. If Wesley wanted me to change, then I would. Just not in the way he expected me to. It was time I took being messy to a whole new level. I started by moving things around. Then I rubbed the initials out on his can of soda and wrote on my own. Then I settled down for an afternoon watching a movie on the couch, my feet up on the upholstery, of course. Yep, I also dropped popcorn all over the place. I couldn't help but giggle as I heard Wesley's disgruntled moans coming from the kitchen. Then I heard a cupboard slam and he appeared in front of me. "Maya, that's mine." He picked the soda can off the floor and examined the altered initials. "And this goes on a coaster on the table. Ugh, I can't stand it anymore." He swatted my legs down. "I'll be your cleaner, but I'm charging you for it." "Sure, Wesley, if that's what you want." I smiled before I threw a piece of popcorn into the air, and it missed my mouth and landed on the couch. He muttered under his breath as he picked it up and marched over to the trash can. Hey, this could be fun, especially as I had no intention of making it easy for him. I left a trail of candy wrappers around the house, dropped crumbs on the couch, and purposely didn't take my sneakers off at the door, so I got mud clumps everywhere. It was so funny watching him squirm as he cleaned up after me. Then one time, when I knew he was in an online work meeting, I barged into his room and dropped an armful of my dirty laundry on his floor. then fled. He was so mad, but couldn't move an inch since his boss was talking. Then suddenly, I got a phone call. Weird. It's from a guy at the law firm I'd worked at. Turns out they're short-staffed and asked me to come back to work until they find someone else. But you know what? I was too sick of that job, so I politely declined the offer. But suddenly, he yelled at me with words like, "Don't be so full of yourself. You should have been grateful for this offer, because I don't think you'd be able to survive one day in the world out there. You're irresponsible, unorganized, and lazy. Have fun being jobless." Then he hung up, leaving me speechless. I felt so terrible. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "I'm sorry about earlier, but I'm really not in the mood right now, Wes," I mumbled upon seeing Wesley walk into my room, probably to scold me about the pile of laundry. But instead, he sat down next to me, passed me a tissue, and told me that I may be the messiest girl ever, but I deserved better than that shitty job and shitty boss. "Trust yourself. I know there's more to you than this. And maybe, if you find the right job that you're passionate about, who knows? You can even become the most organized and diligent girl ever." He teased me to brighten up the atmosphere. Okay, so maybe Wesley wasn't all bad. After that, I decided to try and be a teensy bit tidier from now on, but not too tidy. Later on, he stuck a Post-it note to my door saying he wouldn't be cleaning up after me tonight, as he was going out. I asked the girls where Wesley was, and they looked disappointed, as they said he went out all dressed up and mentioned something about a date. Why did I feel a knot in my chest at the thought of Wesley on a date with some other girl? I couldn't like him, could I? Nah, how could I like someone that particular? I watched a movie to push away those strange feelings, and then went to bed. Only, I found myself unable to sleep. So at about 1 a.m., I went and got a glass of water. That's when he returned. I asked him how his date went, and he looked really awkward, muttered something out about how she was just a friend, then lingered on the spot there for me to finish, so he could wash up my glass and put it away before he went to bed. Okay, so that was weird. The weirdness continued for the next week. Wesley continued to clean up after me, but he couldn't even meet my eye, and whenever I tried talking to him, he ignored me, then hurried off. Then, one time when I was in my room, I heard footsteps by my door. I knew it was him with one of his dumb notes again. So I pushed open the door to see him standing there, red-faced, then shouted at him, "Why are you avoiding me?" He blushed and looked at the note he'd just stuck to my door. Quickly, I read it. "I'm sorry I've been avoiding you. The truth is, you're the messiest girl I've met in my whole life, but I still can't stop thinking about you. W." What? Did he like me too? I pulled him into my room to talk about this, but he looked at the mess and shook his head. "That doesn't live there." He gestured to the coat thrown on my bed. "Give it a rest." I rolled my eyes before I pulled him closer to me and kissed him. And we've been together ever since. As much as it pains me to say, it turns out that this messy girl can't live without her cleaning-obsessed guy. But then they do say that opposites attract. Who knew that bonding over Post-it notes and spoiled pizza could lead to something more?